opening. I'm Matt Reardon. I'm president of Harvard University Effective Altruism, and you may be coming to the sad realization that you will be putting up with me a lot today. I'm now here to interview Professor Max Bazerman about some of the behavioral economic insights that are relevant to the EA community. Max Bazerman is the Jesse Isidor Straus Professor of Business and Administration at Harvard Business School, as well as a board member of Like You Can Say, an organization that Peter Singer founded, very much in the effective altruism spirit. He's a renowned scholar in behavioral economics. He's the author, co-author, and co-editor of 20 books and more than 200 articles and chapters. Much of his work touches on why we often act unethically without meaning to do so. And we are very grateful to have him here to answer some questions. So let's all give a welcome to Max Bazerman.
Thank you.
Just to get started, Max, I'll ask you maybe a tough or difficult question because I'm going to state up front that there is no canonical qualification for what it means to be an effective altruist. But do you consider yourself an effective altruist?
No. There's too many people in the room who lead better lives than I do. So I wouldn't want to make that claim. But it's interesting. I'm not sure I like the question, but I thought I should first answer it before disagreeing with the question. It seems to me that that question feels a lot like, are you a utilitarian? Well, I aspire to be more utilitarian. I want to do more good in the world. But do I want to have my life audited for the ways in which I'm falling short of being a perfect utilitarian? Certainly not. And that's why I said no to sort of, are you an effective altruist? I don't think any of us quite make it. So, yeah, in the effective altruism world, we certainly read about prototypes who are superheroes, who I can't imagine being willing to go that far in terms of how I lead my life. But even they are falling short of that perfect state. And I think that so much of what we see going on in terms of the social science of ethics, and I'm thinking of Josh Green as an exemplar who will be on your program later today. The empirical work we're doing sort of really kind of gets us rethinking about how philosophy has specified these concepts, where in philosophy, utilitarian is this kind of perfect state. And when we think about that concept from a social psychological perspective or a social science perspective, it just makes sense to think of this on a continuum. And in many ways, I think that the idea of are you an effective altruist makes me nervous. It could make me want to run away and party instead, because it's so hard to get to that state. But if the challenge instead was, can you imagine 3 years from now being a more effective altruist? Sort of, I'm ready to sign up for that plan.
Wow, fantastic. So I asked something that might be perceived and probably was a little bit of a gotcha question. You took me down with you, so I'm not an effective altruist here. At least in an absolute sense. And I think that's a nice thing about the community is that we don't try to answer categorical questions like that so much as, as in like who counts as what, or who qualifies as what, as much as like what's the next step that we ought to take, and what considerations can we take. Okay, so in your book on ethics, Blind Spots, you talk about limited moral awareness. And what do you think the relevance of that concept is to EA and the message that we bring? The message we bring is generally that you should expand your awareness, expand your circle, we say. But there's just this general phenomenon in society that you describe in the book that it might be an obstacle to that. And what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so many of you know the work of Kahneman and Tversky or Thaler and this world of behavioral economics, behavioral insights, which focuses on the fact that humans aren't as rational as the standard economic model would assume, or probably not as rational as most of us assume we are. And this is a literature really dedicated to identifying what are the systematic and predictable ways in which we fall short of rationality. And in Blind Spots, my co-author Ann Penbrunsel and I try to provide the mirror of why we aren't as ethical as we would be with more reflection. So rather than looking at sort of selfishness as a reason why we're not more ethical, we think that there are lots of perfectly nice people who do bad things without any awareness that they're doing anything wrong whatsoever. And the goal of the book is to identify pathways to help people become more aware of what they actually do. Because we believe if we can make people more reflective, in fact, more reflection would lead to greater ethicality. And just to be clear, when I use the word ethicality, I am thinking of that in a Peter Singer sense. So while I wouldn't claim to be a utilitarian for reasons that we already discussed, I'm perfectly comfortable going with utilitarianism as kind of the goal state that we would want to achieve. Just like at an individual level, we would want to be more rational. We're just limited. I'm delighted to think about how do we get people to move toward being more utilitarian.
So I have almost a sort of two-part follow-up. One, you sort of say as an assumption that when we talk about making people more ethical, we're thinking in the Peter Singer utilitarian sense. Now, one part of the question is, what do you see as, the sort of behavioral psychological obstacle that might be easiest to overcome, and how do we do that? And then, does whatever that obstacle is, does it sort of complement a utilitarian framework in terms of the reasoning that you can present and that?
I think so. I thought the last session, I know we're on the new session here, but I thought the last session was fascinating. In the sense that Bruce Friedrich, who I had not met before that session, just did a great job of talking about sort of meeting people where they are and accepting the mindset that the bulk of people are likely to have, and how would we increase plant-based and clean meat consumption. And I thought he just did a terrific job of helping us think about those issues. And I think that that if we understand what those barriers are that keep us from being more utilitarian, we can do a better job of moving people closer to that state. So Josh Green's book, Moral Tribes, I think is just terrific, and the title gives you one answer, which I'll come to in a minute. But there's a book, there's a chapter in the book on what's his term? Chapter 11. It's my favorite chapter of any book that I read in recent history. But chapter 11 sort of does a good job of really pulling insights from other philosophical perspectives and other reasons why we aren't as utilitarian as we would like to be. So one obvious one is selfishness. So a lot of people care about themselves too much, and I think that that's really a tough one. I think it's tough to challenge, but certainly, and this is easier for me at 62 than it is for most of you who are, on average, looks like 40 years younger than me. But if you do imagine yourself in your final days, how would you want to look back at your life? And earning more money probably isn't the answer. The answer probably has to do with doing more good. Okay. But sort of selfishness is certainly a barrier. But there's also a barrier, and this is in Josh's title, more sort of people focusing on their tribes. So people focus on their own in-group, and as a result, we don't do a good job of creating as much pleasure and minimizing pain as we could, because we care about our own religion, our own university group, our own whatever, our own species, as was reflected in the prior talk as well. And I think that if people were aware of the degree to which their focus on their own tribe reduce their ability to do good in the world, I think the tribalism would go down dramatically. And I think that tribalism is an enormously dysfunctional social, psychological phenomena that we face. But there's other things that we do in terms of, in negotiations we have a term called the mythical fixed pie. And if you take two people who negotiate a multi-issue negotiation, and there's gains from trade by trading off issues so that you get what you care more about in return for giving me what I care more about. If we can break the assumption that the pie is fixed and find gains from trade, we can do wiser things. Again, in the last talk, focusing on food, sort of, we heard about sort of cooperating with organizations like Tyson, and I certainly have a very negative reaction to the word Tyson, but I think that we heard lots of good reasons why, if we actually want to do as much good as we possibly can do, it probably makes sense to reach out and talk to people who our first instinct might not be to talk to. Now, there may be limits, so I'm not sure that I'm recommending cooperating in any way with sort of tobacco companies or Exxon, and maybe not Tyson, but I think openness to learning more to find out was an intriguing aspect of what I've heard. So I think we have a variety of barriers that keep us from finding the opportunities to create as much good as we possibly can.
So I find your discussion, your pointing to tribalism as a particularly difficult obstacle interesting, in the sense that, first of all, I completely agree that tribalism is a big problem. I'm a user of Facebook, and perhaps other people in the room are as well. And I think when you look across what people represent as important themselves, and you think about it through a tribal lens, you can see that that's a major driving factor. I guess my next question would be kind of two parts. Is tribalism something we can surmount? And I think as an effective altruist community, we've actually done a pretty good job pointing out this problem. And again, like trying to expand the circle, trying not to think inwardly but think outwardly. But isn't that in itself a sort of doctrine for a tribe? That we're going to be the anti-tribalist tribe, and that's what's driving us. And so is it a thing you can escape? Is it a thing you should want to escape? If you can do what I perceive the EA community to do.
That was complicated. So let me try to pull out a few different pieces there. So I'll start with the easy part. I think you want to be aware of the degree to which you're affected by tribalism. So, and my guess is the degree to which you're aware of your tribalism would lead you to reduce it. Okay, so one of my favorite examples, or most terrible examples, when I think about universities like the ones that are represented in this room, so I'll speak for Harvard. I imagine 30 years from now, when people look back at 2018, the fact that we still allow legacy admission policies to exist. I just think that's going to be like a shocking ethical embarrassment. And when you folks are 50, you're going to say it's kind of shocking that that still existed in 2018, because it's so morally not justifiable. Okay, and I think that most people who are involved in helping legacy admission processes continue, either they're admissions officers or their parents who want their kid in, they'd be okay if legacy admissions went away, except for they don't want to go away for their child, or admitting the kids of faculty members or donors, all these kind of sort of morally unjustifiable admissions policies. These are bad things. And I think most of the people who are involved in some way in allowing them to perpetuate aren't giving any thought whatsoever to the person who isn't getting in because the space has been taken by somebody who's bumped up. And so I think that the fact that sort of we hide from the impact of the tribalism allows us to focus on the nice part. So as a Harvard faculty member, the number of sort of friends of relatives, relatives of relatives, relatives that I haven't seen for 30 years who reappear when their child is 18. It's kind of stunning. I mean, and when people are involved in these dysfunctional, unethical behaviors, I think that they do it by focusing on the good that they're doing for the recipient of the action, and they're hiding from the harm that they're doing. And I think most tribal behaviors, where we're talking about a limited resource, and so that could be access to mortgage money, it could be admission to a university. When we act in a tribal way, we focus on the positive, and if we had ways of highlighting the negative side of that, I think it becomes much, much more difficult for people to maintain that sort of preference for ignoring that problem. So I do think that people would be less tribal if they were more aware. So that's one simple answer. So I think tribalism is a little bit of a problem for the effective altruist community. So you are a strange tribe because you're kind of a tribe that believes that tribes shouldn't exist. And yet the rest of the world sees you as kind of pretty weird people. And so my spouse is very involved in the Boston philanthropic community, and I think that her specialty in life is convincing other pretty wealthy people that they should be donating more of their funds. So that part is very consistent with effective altruism. On the other hand, in the world in which she interacts, people want to feel and touch and meet and hug the people who get the dollars. So I'd say that she's much more influential on getting new money donated to what you would think of as very inefficient causes. And so so most Boston-based philanthropies are just kind of not doing well on a 0 to 100 effective altruism score. On the other hand, if it's a gateway drug to get people into philanthropy, it may be net a good thing. And again, going back to the idea of meeting people where they are, it may in fact be quite useful. I'm also kind of, I'm struck by sort of finding donors where they are. So I was in some discussion having to do with fundraising in a former administrative capacity that I had, where I basically heard the statement made that nobody gives 7-figure amounts of money without their name going on something. Okay, and I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's something that I heard in passing. It strikes me that effective altruists haven't figured out yet how to let people put their names on stuff. Okay, and you might view putting your names on stuff as arrogant and obnoxious, but Harvard would not be doing as well if they couldn't put names on stuff. And that may be a small price to pay. So I don't have the problems with people's names going up on a building like they do with allowing their kids to go to Harvard because of the donation. So people want to communicate to their tribe. I think that there's also an interesting issue that I do think that the effective altruism movement does look down on traditional philanthropy in a number of ways. And I'm stunned by the fact that traditional philanthropy barely knows who you are. And if they know who you are, it's geeky kids in college with some tech fans. But figuring out how this dialogue would develop that seems to be sort of a critical element, because the folks who would stereotype you with very, very little knowledge, in fact, they would like to have more positive impact on the world. So, and so you have ideas and you have knowledge that would allow them to do more good in the world. But I don't think that dialogue has developed because of the tribalism that you're describing, which is kind of fascinating. And I've never thought about sort of effective altruists as a tribe like that before. So that's an interesting question. I think I've rambled on about lots of different parts of your question.
So I'm happy to upload your opinion VA in the meantime, I guess. I like this idea of a sort of, did you say drug? You said gateway drug?
Yeah.
to giving. It's interesting because just in my own experience, kind of being involved in the effective altruism community at Harvard, we as a group sort of made a decision that, like, you know, presenting ourselves as the animal welfare people or the existential risk people was just not something that was going to appeal to the sort of rank and file Harvard law student. If we wanted to make an argument to people, we had to focus on global poverty and like tropical diseases and things like that. It very much in the spirit of, like, this is as close to a gateway drug as we have. But you talk about this second bridge to what we would call traditional philanthropy. And I think you point exactly to the right problem, that it's hard to point to the negative consequences of you know, tribal behavior. And through the effective altruism lens, the negative consequence is often an opportunity cost. Is that you know, we have a sense that people sort of, they budget a certain amount for altruistic things, for charity, and the function, that amount is not a function of how effective whatever they donate is going to be, but it's, you know, it's a function of, like, what portion of my income I'm willing to, you know, put into other people generally. So can you comment on, like, maybe some promising way that effective altruists might better communicate the idea of this negative opportunity cost to taking the next step along the gateway, or through the gateway, the metaphor works?
So first of all, I think the effective altruism world is doing a fantastic job of creating a new strategy to bring people into philanthropy and to do it more effectively in terms of commitments of donating future money rather than, many students have limited money now, but they're going to have a lot of money in the future, and it just doesn't feel that tough to give away 10% of money you don't even have. I think that those kinds of strategies are just great. In terms of converting more traditional philanthropists, I think it's hard. I think opportunity costs are just, people don't pay attention to opportunity costs the way they pay attention to hard costs that they pay out of their wallet. But I think that I think the trick is how to create that dialogue, how to create more awareness. So I really think that there's a lot of generous philanthropic people who haven't yet given 15 minutes of thought to utilitarianism or effective altruism in their life. So the question is how to create that dialogue to get the minds of more people going. And this is not meant to be a criticism. I think that the state that the effective altruism world is in is kind of stunningly successful. Okay? But on the other hand, that still consists of a very small percent of people who are interested in donating their money. And I think figuring out how to sort of find this gateway drug into the effective altruism movement is a kind of quite useful thing to do. So I often, I apologize, I'm not a vegan, I am a vegetarian, but only for 24 years. And sort of a lot of years of meat eating before that. But my spouse, the more traditional philanthropist, she became a vegetarian 3 years before me. So I was out at the Stanford Center for Behavioral Science for 6 months when we lived in Evanston, Illinois, and she was working on her doctorate. And while I was gone, she became a vegetarian. And we eat in restaurants a lot, and she cooks and I clean up. So she became a vegetarian while I was going to quit cooking meat. So from 1990 to 1993, I ate less and less meat. And then in 1993, I didn't make a decision to become a vegetarian. I noticed that I didn't eat meat anymore. And once I noticed that I didn't eat meat anymore, I figured I must be a vegetarian. There's a social psychologist by the name of Daryl Venn who's done some very controversial work, but he's also did some very nice work on the fact that we often learn about our attitudes by looking at our behavior. So I often describe myself as a Bennian vegetarian. Because that was my entryway. And I think that if we can come up with more ways to interact with the more traditional philanthropic community, that could speed things up a bit. And you can also just wait for us to die and take over the world. But that's a slower process than other strategies, and that might include more conversion.
All right, so that was sort of, I'm glad that you talked about your relationship with your wife. I don't know how scalable becoming a good cook and marrying outside the community would be as a solution.
So just to be clear, before she was a vegetarian, she was a bad cook. Because you can throw a piece of chicken in the oven and call it dinner, and when you throw a vegetable in the oven, it doesn't work. So she became a vegetarian and became a good cook while I was gone for 6 months. So it was kind of a very Pareto efficient sort of set of circumstances.
Instant impact. But on that sort of autobiographical note, I'm wondering a little bit about how you got from maybe becoming a vegetarian in 1993 to now working with Light You Can Save, and what your work is like.
Oh, I'm supportive of the work that they do. The Life You Can Save is interacting with a number of social scientists in the Boston area. So I got to know Charlie and through Josh Green is a co-author and friend, and between Charlie and Josh, I had the amazing opportunity to spend some time with Peter Singer. So I think that I kind of went from sort of using behavioral decision research or Cognitive Diversity 101 applied to negotiation, and that's probably what I was first known for as a researcher, studying the systematic and predictable mistakes that negotiators make, to moving that same lens into the world of ethics. So I think I started that not necessarily thinking about utilitarianism, but thinking about sort of the fact that if people were more aware, they would make wiser decisions. And I think for me, utilitarianism is so appealing in order to have a benchmark of where you're going. I find it confusing to think about how do you be better if we don't define better. And so that might upset some deontologists, because I'm sure that some deontologists would think that they have a clear sense of it. My mind's simple. For me, utilitarianism is a sort of a really, really nice benchmark. And then I think the effective altruists are just kind of a phenomenal, wonderful, real-world manifestation of what does it mean to move toward a more utilitarian world. So no, I've been to effective altruism events before, and I've come inside in the back to just learn from your community, and I find what you're doing kind of just fascinating, despite our 40-year age divide.
So, I mean, thank you. I take that as a compliment that you've just sort of been progressively roped into this. Now you're at the front of the room.
Happy to be in the back, happy to be in the front. Whatever will do the most good.
Well, thank you for that, Professor Bazerman. I think at this point we are 20 minutes from lunch. So if anyone would like to come up and ask Professor Bazerman a question, now is a great time. Right in the middle.
I'm not going to ask.
You know, I can't get you into the Harvard Business School.
We'll see about that. So you did a lot of work with blind spots. There was a great paper written by somebody named Williams that wrote the possibility of an ongoing moral catastrophe about how there's moral blind spots. So the Holocaust and how people involved didn't quite know they're doing something so terribly wrong. What do you think is like a moral blind spot for us right now, whether it be animal welfare, or what would be most pressing?
So it's probably obvious, but I'm an American citizen. So sort of Republicans sort of buying into Trumpism has been kind of a shocking blind spot. So I assume that there are some people who we would have viewed as reasonable human beings before Trump was elected, and the fact that for political expediency, they're willing to tolerate the truly terrible things that he's perpetuating on the world. I find kind of quite remarkable as a blind spot. And a lot of my work is about sort of not noticing, not speaking up when other people are doing bad things. And there's just a surprisingly large number of bad leaders where Trump is probably the most important exemplar, doing bad things, and I'm shocked by how people are speaking up. So that certainly comes to mind. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, you are. So, I mean, that was, or more generally, it doesn't answer the question. What are we all doing that's like, in retrospect, like, wow, we really should have been doing that. So in the paper it cites, not, giving more to alleviate global poverty. Like, we can look in 100 years from now and say, wow, we're moral animals for not, doing that, making these decisions. So is there anything else, blind spot wise that you could think of?
Yeah, so if we think about all the bad behaviors that make the newspaper, so we can think of Enron, or we can think of Bernie Madoff, or we can think of Donald Trump, doing terrible things from a utilitarian perspective. And the striking observation is that there's people who have the data, who see the data, who are failing to act. And so one of the things, so I don't have any vision that I know how to keep the next Bernie Madoff from coming into existence. But I do have a vision that the next generation can be trained to notice and speak up in ways in which my generation kind of has failed you, creating many of the problems that we're going to dump on your generation. So I think a simple issue is sort of, as many of you are making commitments to donate a certain amount of money as you start to earn it, I think it's a good time to also make a commitment to speaking up against wrongdoing. So whether it's the failure to donate money to alleviate world poverty, to miss opportunities to create just obvious good trades like eating more flavorful food that happens to be better for the world and costs less. I mean, that's just a good deal. But also, when people are just doing things that are simply wrong, when there's bad behaviors, being ready to speak up against that, and this sort of thinking that through before you're on the spot, where there's some risk that your career won't thrive as much if you speak up, but it's obviously the right thing to do. I think that you're more likely to do the right thing if you thought about those kinds of issues in advance.
Thanks.
I think you need to come up to the mic if I understand it.
Yeah, so I'll just let you, the gentleman with the beard in the middle, come around the mic.
And someone else can come up onto the on-deck circle right there.
Hey, thank you for your answer so far. I want to tie together a couple of things we talked about. So we talked about tribalism and effective altruism. Since just with the gist of what we're doing, coalesces around positions that filter out certain people. We don't have a lot of people concerned about animal welfare. Most of us come as students from liberal universities. So for example, people like effective altruism already has a strong filter against Trump, like you mentioned it.
Has strong filters against.
Strong filters that people who are Republican and voted for Trump would feel excluded from effective altruism, whether we do it on purpose or not, just because of the sort of people we are, the sort of things we pursue. And on the other hand, you talked about reaching out, for example, to donors. So look, like half the country is Republican, probably half the rich people who might be interested in philanthropy are also Republican. So, can I say, you talked about win-wins. Do you think there's a trade-off here between how much we focus on our value versus like having a bigger tent, or this is a false dilemma and it's not the trade-off that we need to make, and somehow we can get everybody together without sacrificing our values?
A lot of interesting questions. So if I reword your question in a more hostile way, maybe the sharpest point on that is, are you being dysfunctional by insulting Trump in a public forum? And I think, I guess I'm pretty confident that the answer is no. In fact, as a Harvard Business School professor, I have a moral obligation to speak out against somebody who creates so many behaviors that move in an anti-utilitarian direction. So I think that you could have a legitimate debate about questions like, should we put up a fence to keep people out to secure our borders? I think that I'm not in favor of a fence, but I think that I can see an argument there. I think scaring 11 million people who are here and encouraging them to engage in more dysfunctional behavior because of the risk of deportation, when deportation would not serve the interests of the United States, I think that just makes no sense at all. It's an idea hostile to a kind of reasonable utilitarian state. I think that the anti-trade aspects of Trump's views to create trade wars that were very unlikely to win from any kind of reasonable negotiation analysis creates less welfare in the world as a result. So I think that when someone's policies are so consistently moving in a direction that's against utilitarian instincts, I think I have a moral obligation to speak out against them rather than to be concerned about offending some people. I don't mean to offend people who believe in free markets, incentives, and a variety of other things that are consistent with Republicans over the long term rather than Democrats. And I'm an enormous fan of free markets. I just think that Trump policies come from somebody who so creates an image of behaviors of a world leader that we should find an embarrassment. It was so many policies that are anti-utilitarian that I think that, given that I occasionally get to be in front of the room rather than back of the room, I have a moral obligation to talk about those things.
Colin?
I think that's your on deck circle. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No problem.
I got it. Okay. I think Matt's going to make fun of me for asking this question. So, like you, I'm very sympathetic to Peter Singer's philosophy and utilitarianism.
I thought the whole room was.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of interesting scholarship though about how we should take the uncertainty that surrounds that framework, right? And there are a ton of people who are familiar, have read Peter Singer, but still don't buy it. I'm wondering what you think the blind spots of utilitarian, sympathetic people are morally.
So I think that goes back to an earlier question. What are the barriers to good behaviors? So I think that sort of individualism, and with individualism comes selfishness, is a barrier. I think tribalism is something that's pretty ingrained in us from the very beginning. I think that the mythical fixed pie is a barrier to finding net overall agreements of greater value. I think coalitional behavior, there was a question about coalitions, but so often coalitions imply that before the organizational group meeting occurs, we work not toward finding the best decision, but toward finding enough people so that we can win, our side can win, and that can prevail. I think silos end up being sort of a barrier. So so the fact that the CIA and the FBI didn't communicate very well prior to 9/11 ends up being a barrier. Silos are generally an enormous barrier. I think that anti-trade policies are creating silos. So there are a lot of these that we can think of that are creating problems that keep us from getting closer to that state. And most of these are things that people would justify. So I even said you could reword all the barriers in ways that sound like goods. Okay. So anything nationalistic is a barrier to utilitarianism. Am I answering